There is one sentence that can shake a person more than, "I love you," and it usually sounds nothing like love at all. It sounds cold, it sounds strange, it sounds like distance, and if you have ever walked away from someone feeling deeply seen and deeply confused at the exact same time, stay with me because this may explain everything. What if the moment that hurt you most was not rejection, but fear wearing a mask? What if the mixed signals were not random? What if the silence had meaning? And what if the words that made you doubt the bond were actually the safest version of a confession they knew how to make? In this video, we are going to slow that down and read it clearly, not the obvious moments, not the rare emotional breakthrough. I mean the small, everyday lines that sound ordinary but carry weight underneath them. The comments that look sharp but are full of attention. The distance that appears right when feelings grow deeper. The strange honesty hidden inside awkward phrasing. If you have ever thought, "Did I imagine this whole connection?" do not click away, because what you are about to hear may put language to something your body already knew. And the most surprising part is this: sometimes the person saying the least is feeling the most. Most people think love moves in a straight line. You feel it, you trust it, you say it. The emotion grows, the words follow, and even when being vulnerable feels scary, it still moves forward in a way that makes sense. But with an avoidant person, the whole pattern can reverse. The feeling grows, sometimes very strongly, and instead of moving toward open expression, it moves toward control, toward hiding, toward coded behavior, toward safer side doors that do not require full emotional exposure. That is why being close to someone like this can feel so intense and so unclear at the same time. The heart is there, but the language is scrambled. The care is there, but it comes out sideways. The attachment is real, but it is protected by habits built long before you arrived. So if you tried to read them the way you would read someone who loves in a direct and relaxed way, you probably missed what was right in front of you. And to be fair, how could you not? Nobody teaches people how to hear love when it comes wrapped in tension, caution, and contradiction. Nobody teaches you that devotion can sound like hesitation, that fear can interrupt tenderness, that someone can be emotionally invested and still look emotionally unavailable in the moment that matters. So let's translate it carefully, because once you see this pattern clearly, you start hearing very different meanings inside familiar words. One of the first signs is a strange kind of criticism, the kind nobody asked for. I know that sounds wrong at first, but stay with me. When an avoidant person starts noticing your tiny patterns, the details most people miss, it often means you are taking up serious space in their inner world. They notice how your tone changes when you are tired but pretending to be fine. They notice the way you stir your drink when you are stressed. They notice what you repeat when you are nervous. They notice what you avoid when something matters too much. And then, instead of saying, "I pay attention to you because you matter to me," they might say something like, "You always do that when you are uncomfortable," or "You act different when you talk about that." It lands like critique, but underneath it is focused attention, deep attention. Nobody studies the small habits of a person they do not care about. Nobody mentally stores little personal patterns if there is no emotional significance attached. The avoidant person in love often cannot stop noticing you, but because direct softness feels too exposed, the noticing comes out as commentary. This does not mean every criticism is love. Some criticism is just criticism. But when it has that oddly personal, specific, almost intimate quality, it can reveal something important. It means you are not passing through their awareness lightly. You are staying there. You are being tracked in the quiet places, and that matters more than most people realize. Another line that sounds simple but carries a lot underneath it is, "I'm not good at this," or "I don't really know how to do relationships," or "You should probably not expect too much from me." On the surface, that sounds like a warning. It sounds like distance management. It sounds like they are politely preparing the exit. And yes, sometimes it is exactly that. But in a deepening connection, it can also mean something much more vulnerable. It can mean, "I care enough to feel scared of failing here." It can mean, "I want this to go well, and that desire is making me panic." It can mean, "I already feel the weight of what this connection deserves, and I'm not sure I can meet it without getting hurt or hurting you." That kind of fear does not show up where there is no attachment. People do not worry about being enough for someone who means nothing to them. They worry when the loss would actually hurt. They worry when your opinion matters. They worry when they can already feel their defenses slipping and do not know how to stay in control. So when you hear that statement in the right context, listen closely. It may be clumsy honesty. It may be the nearest they can get to saying, "I want to do this well with you, and the fact that I want that at all is terrifying me." That does not erase the impact on you. It does not magically make confusion feel safe, but it does help explain why insecurity often shows up right when the bond is getting stronger, not weaker. Then there is the line that can change everything if you catch its real meaning. You're different. Sometimes it is said softly, almost with surprise. Sometimes it comes out guarded, like they are annoyed that you are affecting them. Sometimes it is slipped into a longer sentence so quickly you almost miss it. But however it shows up, it is not small. Avoidant people often survive closeness by sorting others fast. They place people into familiar boxes: safe, unsafe, casual, too demanding, easy to handle, easy to leave, predictable. That system helps them keep emotional distance while still staying socially connected. But every now and then, someone does not fit the old map. Someone is steady where they expected pressure, kind where they expected manipulation, honest where they expected games, patient without becoming weak, present without forcing, and suddenly the old categories stop working. That is when "you're different" appears. Not as a casual compliment, as evidence that their internal system has met something it cannot explain away. You are not fitting the script that usually helps them stay detached. You are not behaving in the familiar pattern they know how to manage, and that creates both attraction and alarm. It means you are getting through in a way they did not plan for. Not all the way through, because these walls have layers, and people like this often protect themselves in stages, but through enough that they now have to make room for you as something real, something unusual, something they cannot keep at a comfortable emotional distance forever. That is a bigger statement than it sounds like. Now let's talk about one of the most misunderstood lines of all. "I don't need anyone. I'm fine on my own. I've always handled everything myself." When these words show up inside a bond that is clearly getting deeper, they are often not statements of strength. They are emergency reactions, because what is really happening underneath is deeply uncomfortable for them. They are noticing that your presence matters. They think about you when you are not around. They feel your absence more than they want to admit. A message from you can change the mood of their day. Your silence can create a restlessness they cannot explain. Your opinion starts to matter. Your availability starts to matter. And for someone who built safety around self-containment, that shift feels dangerous. So the mind rushes in and says, "No, reclaim control, rebuild the story. You do not need, you do not depend. You are still separate, you are still safe." That is why those statements can show up exactly when attachment is growing. It is not always proof that they feel nothing. Sometimes it is proof they feel too much and do not know how to hold it. The protest becomes evidence. The harder they push on independence in that specific moment, the more likely it is that dependence has already begun to register. And that is what scares them. Keep watching here, because this next part is where many people finally understand the difference between emotional distance and private devotion. One of the clearest signs often sounds like nothing special at all. It is when they protect you in small ways they did not have to. Not the movie scene, not the speech, not the huge romantic gesture. I mean the quiet, practical care that could easily be missed if you are only looking for obvious affection. They make something easier for you without announcing it. They speak up for you when you are not in the room. They remember what overwhelms you and adjust without being asked. They handle a problem before it reaches you. They give you a detail that keeps you safe, saves your time, or reduces your stress. And they do it in a tone so casual you might think it meant nothing. But that is exactly the point. For some people, care is loud. For others, care stays hidden inside usefulness, inside action, inside prevention, inside quiet loyalty. And in many avoidant people, tenderness comes out more easily through function than through direct emotional language. They may not say, "I was thinking about how to make your day lighter because I care about you deeply," but they will do it. They will remember, they will notice, they will protect, they will reduce harm where they can. And those choices matter because they are voluntary. Nobody forced them, nobody assigned them. There was no reward waiting at the end. It was simply care looking for a low-risk form. And often, the things a person does without having to, and without needing credit for it, reveal more love than the things they say when a moment demands performance. There are also the almost confessions, the lines that appear, then disappear, before you can fully hold them. I don't usually tell people this. I wasn't going to say anything, but it's weird how comfortable I feel with you. You somehow got me to talk. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Those lines matter because they show a breach in the wall, small but real. An avoidant person rarely experiences vulnerability as casual. To them, it can feel like exposure, like loss of leverage, like stepping into a space where they may need something back and not receive it. So when they offer even a piece of their interior world, even one memory, one fear, one honest insecurity, it often costs more than it looks like from the outside. That is why they may immediately pull back after, why a warm night can be followed by a colder morning, why closeness can be followed by distance. The opening was real. The retreat is real too. Both are part of the same struggle. This is important because many people misread that pattern and assume the first moment was fake. It usually was not. It was simply unsustainable for them at that level, at least in that phase. They showed something true, then got flooded by the truth of what they had shown. If you have ever been confused by that switch, you are not crazy. The warmth was not an illusion. The fear arrived right after it. And that back and forth can feel brutal unless you understand what is actually happening beneath the surface. There is another sign people often miss because it looks so ordinary. They remember your world, not in a performative way, not because they are trying to impress you. They remember your meeting, your family detail, the thing you said in passing 3 weeks ago, the restaurant you mentioned once, the song you said you used to love, the day that is hard for you every year. They may not build a dramatic emotional moment around it. They may not even say it sweetly, but they remember. And then, at some unexpected point, they refer back to it. That kind of memory is not random. Attention follows investment. The avoidant person who seems detached on the outside can still be deeply organized around you internally. They may look calm while privately tracking your patterns, your likes, your stress points, your shifts in mood. And the reason that can feel so disorienting is because it does not match the stereotype people carry. People assume distance means shallow feeling. They assume limited expression means limited emotion. They assume quiet means absence. But often the truth is stranger than that. There can be intense feeling with very restricted expression. There can be deep attachment with poor emotional delivery. There can be devotion without fluency. And if you have lived this, you know how confusing that is, because one part of you feels the bond, and another part keeps asking for proof in a language you can finally rest in. That gap between what is felt and what is spoken is where so much pain lives. And we need to say something hard here. Understanding this language does not mean you are required to translate it forever. That is where many people get lost. They finally see the hidden care, the coded attachment, the fear behind the distance, and then they start doing all the emotional labor for two people. They excuse every mixed signal. They overwork every silence. They keep decoding, redecoding, and waiting for clarity that never fully arrives. But insight is not the same as safety. Compassion is not the same as reciprocity. You can understand why someone struggles and still recognize that the impact on your nervous system is too heavy. You can see the love underneath and still say, I need love in a form I do not have to translate all the time. That is not cruelty, that is self-respect, because there is a point where indirect love, no matter how sincere, stops being enough to build peace. A relationship cannot survive forever on subtext, hints, and private feeling alone. At some point, truth must become usable. Care must become clear. Love must become something that can be received without constant vigilance. And if that never happens, it is okay to stop calling confusion romance. It is okay to admit that being deeply felt is not the same as being securely loved. That may be the line someone needed to hear today. So if it hits, stay with me, because the final part matters most. The reason this pattern is so painful is because the signals are often real. That is what makes people doubt themselves. If it were all fake, you would feel empty and leave. But it is not empty. There are real moments, real attention, real pull, real softness in flashes, real protection, real longing in the spaces between words. And then there is withdrawal, delay, defensiveness, emotional blur, and sudden coldness that makes you question your own memory. So you end up split inside yourself. One part says, "This is meaningful." Another says, "Then why does it feel so uncertain?" The answer is that both can be true at once. The feeling can be real, and the person can still be unable to express it in a way that creates stability. That is the tragedy of this dynamic. Love may exist, but skill does not. Desire may exist, but regulation does not. Attachment may exist, but the capacity to stay open under emotional pressure may still be underdeveloped. And no amount of your insight can complete work that they must choose for themselves. They have to face the wound that taught them closeness is dangerous. They have to learn that direct care is not the same as losing themselves. They have to practice staying instead of escaping the moment vulnerability appears. Nobody can do that part for them. Not patience, not loyalty, not perfect understanding, not loving them harder. Growth is possible, yes, but only when they participate in it. So, what can you do with all of this? You can stop erasing what you felt. You can stop telling yourself you imagined the connection just because it did not arrive in a clean package. You can trust that your body often noticed the truth before your mind had language for it. When they studied your smallest habits, that meant something. When they blurted out that they were bad at this, that meant something. When they said you were different, that meant something. When they defended their independence a little too strongly right as intimacy deepened, that meant something. When they quietly made your life easier in ways that asked for no praise, that meant something. These were not empty moments. They were pieces of a hidden language. But at the same time, you can also stop using hidden language as a substitute for the direct love you need. Both truths belong together. Yes, you were seeing something real. And yes, you are allowed to want more than real feeling hidden behind fear. You are allowed to want words that match behavior. You are allowed to want steadiness. You are allowed to want emotional clarity that lets your system relax instead of scanning every interaction for buried meaning. That is not asking for too much. That is asking for a relationship you can actually live inside, not just analyze from the outside. And if you choose to stay, let it be with open eyes, not fantasies. Let it be because there is actual movement, actual effort, actual growth toward honesty and emotional presence, not just chemistry, not just mystery, not just the hope that one day the hidden devotion will finally become visible enough to hold. Watch what happens after the close moment. Watch whether they return. Watch whether they can name even a little more truth over time. Watch whether their care becomes clearer, not just deeper in secret, because love that stays buried can still leave damage. Love that never learns to speak can still keep two people lonely. And if you choose to leave, do not rewrite history in the cruelest way by pretending nothing was there. Something was there. That is why it hurt. That is why it mattered. That is why it was so hard to let go. The connection may have been imperfect, frightened, indirect, and full of walls, but it was not necessarily fake. Sometimes the saddest truth is not that love was absent, it is that love was present, but still not developed enough to become a safe home. If this gave language to something you have carried in silence, then hold on to this part. What you noticed in the pauses, in the attention, in the strange little acts of care, in the almost spoken feelings, was real. You were not foolish for seeing it. You were not weak for hoping. You were not wrong for feeling the love inside what looked like confusion. And maybe that is the deepest point of all. Love does not always arrive in a beautiful sentence. Sometimes it arrives as awkward honesty, as tension, as observation, as resistance, as practical care, as the sentence that sounds like distance but contains fear because closeness has already begun to matter. Once you understand that, you stop calling yourself crazy for recognizing meaning in small things. But wisdom is not only about seeing hidden love, it is also about deciding what kind of love you can live with. Because being able to translate someone does not mean you should have to spend your whole life becoming their interpreter. At some point, love has to come out from behind the wall. It has to become direct enough to trust, steady enough to rest in, and honest enough to meet you in the open. Until then, all you can do is see clearly, see the tenderness, see the fear, see the truth, see the limit, and then choose what honors both your heart and your peace. If nobody ever told you this before, let this be the line that stays with you. Sometimes the avoidant person who says the least may feel the most, but your life cannot be built on what someone feels in secret. It has to be built on what they can bring into the light. And if they cannot bring it there yet, that does not mean you imagined the love. It only means love by itself is not always enough.